Morning to those who just joined us. We're going to give it another few minutes just to see who else is coming to participate this morning. But welcome to Diaper Size Projections, which focused on procurement. While we're waiting to kind of see, give other people a few more minutes to join, feel free to drop the name of your organization and your most commonly requested diaper size in the chat. If you don't know your most commonly requested diaper size yet because your program hasn't, fully kicked off, that's okay. But just wanted to see what sizes we're dealing with kind of across the country at this point. So we'll probably give it another minute or so here and then we'll get started. Great, thank you. I know that we've kind of got a wide variety when it comes to uh, showing lots of three, fours, and fives, definitely. Yeah, but in terms of program kickoff, I know where, I think there's one or two recipients that did start in January and others that are focused more on an April or March or April start. So understandable, we're all over the board and looking at different sizes. So I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you all. Fours and fives, yeah, that makes sense based off of our experience as well. Um, this is a smaller cohort than the training I previously posted. So if you all have, there's opportunities to ask questions throughout, but feel free to kind of jump in with any questions that you may have. And we'll give some time for that as well if you have questions through, but we're a smaller group. So I want you to all feel like you can engage as we go. Um, so I believe I've met all of you before at this point, but just to introduce myself again, I'm Jessica Hernandez. I'm the Director of Operations here at Supply Bank. As you may have seen when you enter today's training, it is being recorded and will be posted on ACF's website actually within the next 2 weeks. So they are actively working on getting that website set up. We were emailing back and forth with them this morning about getting that portal set up for everyone to access the previous and upcoming trainings via YouTube links. So we should have that up within the next week or two, and either Supply Bank or ACF will be sending out an email to all grant recipients once that's live. So if you missed any of our 3 previous trainings or want to share them with your other partners, they should be available for use just in a few weeks here. Again, as I previously mentioned, feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout, and we'll go ahead and get started. Oop, sorry about that. So just really quickly before running through today's agenda, I just wanted to remind everyone that today's training is really focused on procurement size projections. So we're talking about how to order to use economies of scale in your procurement. So if your organization is a distribution site and you're more looking for that information around how to project your needs around, an individual site, the training that we hosted earlier this week on the 21st was probably a better fit for you. And that will be posted, as I said, in the upcoming weeks. So today we're going to be kind of talking more on a larger scale where you're, procuring diapers for multiple sites. So with that, just wanted to do a quick overview as it relates to diaper sizing. Generally determined based on the weight of the child. The table here shows how weight, age, and usage kind of interrelate with each other. It is important to keep in mind that as you're, procuring diapers, that diaper sizing isn't uniform across all brands, kind of similar to clothing size, as I'm sure we all know. Because of this, there tends to be overlapping in sizes to accommodate the difference in brand and children who are in in between two sizes. So, for example, if your child weighs about 25 pounds, they really could wear a size 3 or a size 4, depending upon the brand and also, the body composition of the child. So now we're kind of going to talk about the importance of projections. So projections from a procurement standpoint are vital for a number of reasons. The first off being vendor communication and negotiation. So strong projections allows you to communicate your needs to your vendors in a timely manner. Most vendors like to see projections for a minimum of 6 months. But the more information you have available, the better. It also gives you a stronger negotiating stance because you can kind of show the longevity of your program and the overall amount of diapers you're looking to procure, not only in that first 6 months, but in the next 6 months and so on and so forth. So leveraging stronger projections for, in this case, 2 years worth of diapers can allow you to show vendors the size and scope and hopefully negotiate deeper discounts. Additionally, moving on to our next point, it allows for decreasing deliveries from vendors. So, understanding your need on a larger scale instead of just looking at it month to month allows you to be a bit more strategic with your purchasing. Some vendors will offer deeper discounts if you're able to purchase by the truckload, assuming you have the storage capacity. And then purchasing in large quantities can obviously allow for additional price negotiations. And if the vendor is charging delivery fees, being able to purchase a full truckload as opposed to a few pallets is going to offer you a deeper discount when it comes to delivery costs. So, next, it allows you to be responsive to distribution partners' needs. So, by purchasing diapers for multiple months at a time, this allows you to maintain a stock across all sizes and respond to requests in a timely manner instead of waiting for your next diaper delivery. So, you really don't want to be in a position where you're ordering diapers on a monthly basis to then distribute them on a monthly basis, because depending upon if there are supply chain issues or other delays, you could end up in a situation where you don't have diapers and you have 4 distribution sites that are supposed to have, a delivery the next week, and you're not potentially going to be able to meet their needs. So you really want to be looking at, procuring anywhere from 3 to 6 months worth of diapers at a time and storing those to then distribute them out to your partners. Finally, strong projections have both financial and cost implications. So, strong projections allows you to understand your costs of goods and services for the next 6 to 24 months, depending upon how far out you're looking, and actually not only communicating that to vendors, but also communicating that internally with your finance department. So, depending upon your agency's structure and how much procurement you're either already doing or going to start doing, your finance department may be more or less hands off in this process. Within our agency, finance is a separate department from operations. I know for a lot of smaller agencies, they're overlapped. You may have a separate procurement department as well. So, kind of all of that comes into play as you're doing this process and communicating, either within your department or across departments about, not only what your needs are, but how that affects your agency's cash flow over the next 6 to 24 months. So before we start talking about how we actually go about doing projections, has anyone on the call started working on diaper projections for their program as a whole? And if anyone has, would anyone be willing to kind of share how that's going or, where they're at in that process? And if the answer is no, that's okay too. Oh, Nafia, let's see. Um, Yeah, so if anyone has experience they'd like to share, that's great. If not, obviously, I know you all are at the beginning and you're probably just starting to think or work through this either yourself or with the procurement partner that you're working with as a grant recipient. Okay, great. Yeah, having your partner, the Diaper Bank of North Carolina, is a great asset in terms of being able to work with a diaper bank who's already kind of been up and running and doing this. Yeah, definitely to understand what they're doing and how they're kind of thinking about projecting not only for your program, but I'm sure for other programs that they're doing as well. Great. So, kind of moving on, our next piece is data. Oh,
Oh,
Mary, yeah.
mhm.
This stale, but just starting on a monthly basis. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So, yeah, I think starting on a monthly scale is kind of great as your first thinking about this and being able to build up from there, particularly if you're trying to be conservative with cost or just not exactly sure. Yeah, sizing, definitely. We'll talk about that in a little bit here, but sizing's really a guessing game, at the beginning, particularly if you don't have historical data. Um, and if your distribution partners aren't sure of, who they're working with yet, some agencies, if they're working with more focused on like newborns, you obviously can at that point focus more of your resources on newborn or size one. But if they're, trying to still figure out who their participants are, it definitely creates a challenge around, what sizes you need and how to go about procuring them. So with that, with data collection, so it's important to kind of have some initial conversations with your distribution sites to gain an understanding of, who they're going to be working with. So some questions to kind of be asking of them and thinking about kind of your procurement needs is how many diapers will be provided by per child. So this obviously is something that, depending upon your program, the site could be setting, or either the procurement partner, whether that's the diaper bank or the association, could be setting that. It's kind of good to have a standard there as opposed to letting distribution sites decide for themselves. Um, how many children will be served per month? So, what is their projected volume? Are they thinking 50 children? Are they thinking 100? The starting sizes for those children if they have them, and then also how frequently they're going to be looking for delivery to be received. So as I mentioned, in some cases, sites may not know how many children they will be serving, or they may know how many children, but they don't yet know their starting sizes. So we kind of have two recommendations in terms of how we've approached that, both historically and currently. So the first is utilizing historical data. So if you or your partner has previously operated a diaper program in that area or an area with similar demographics, you can kind of utilize that information to guide your size projections for the first few months until you get good data. So say, you haven't done a diaper kit program in a specific city before, but your diaper bank partner did one 2 years ago, and they have kind of some information there from the number of families they were providing resources to and the sizes that were provided. It's not going to be perfect, but it gives you kind of a general sense of what, the needs may be in that area and to kind of help start guiding your projections. The other approach that we recommend is having a conversation with sites broadly to understand the ages of the children they're serving. So, kind of as I mentioned earlier, are they focused on newborns or focused on 3 to 4 year olds? Obviously, those two groups of children have very different size needs. And so, having that understanding, at least from your distribution partners, will give you a broad sense of, okay, if they're serving 100 kids and it's only going to be, 3 to 4 year olds, we're probably looking at, size 5 to 6, maybe even getting into toddler diapers at that point, and understanding how that might play into your projections. So you want to be having this conversation with all of the sites you're distributing diapers to. That way you can understand the overall programmatic scope. And then this needs to be aggregated. That way you can understand your need for all of the sites you're working with. And so then the last piece of this is we would definitely recommend buffering your sizes. So depending upon the focus of your program, we would recommend a buffer of 5 to 10% per size for your first few orders to ensure that you have enough inventory coverage for all requests. This does mean that obviously you're going to be spending a little bit more at the beginning of your program, but as the program gets up and running, you have a better sense of what sizes are needed and have more data available. You can adjust that buffer by size. If you're not doing very many ones or twos, you can maybe only buffer, 1 or 2% there, but you're doing a lot of size six, doing more like a 10% buffer there. And then as you're getting close to the end of the program with the diaper distribution pilot, you can kind of scale that back and maybe not be buffering at all just to make sure you don't end up with a ton of excess inventory. So kind of the next piece of data is data maintenance. So this is, maintaining and actively looking at your data month over month. So the first piece of that is inventory tracking. So it's not only important from an inventory management perspective, but also from a size management and projections perspective. So having strong inventory management practices in place allows your organization to keep tight control on your inventory and where it's being distributed. So we discussed some of the best practices around this in the storage and receiving training for distribution sites on March 5th, 14th. And we'll be reviewing that again on the April 4th training, which is going to be focused on more warehouse management. So in addition to inventory tracking, we strongly recommend doing monthly reviews of your data. So that really allows you to make sure that on a monthly basis, you're seeing not only where your inventory is at, but also where your sizes are at. So what we're doing on a monthly basis is we're looking at our data not only from our order requests, but also from our inventory management system. We're then taking that information to then understand, what orders have been placed, where is our sizing at, and then using that to help build projections for future months and also understanding how it relates to our current inventory so we can kind of communicate that back to vendors around our needs, not only for the current time period, but how they will continue to change. So with that, we're going to now kind of look at what actually doing projections looks like. So this is kind of an example of doing some month to month projections. This is just for one specific site. So the first month that we're looking at here, November, this was the first month we were distributing diapers to this partner. We didn't have good data to start out for planned distribution. So we had to use historical data from another program in that area. Um, but this partner wasn't even able to tell us what their expected age focus was. So as you can see, our projections were pretty far off for the first month. We really just based off of our historical programming thought they were going to be doing a lot more of the size 5 and 6 diapers than they actually ended up doing. And so they really ended up focusing on the smaller sizes. So, we are able to accommodate these fluctuations because of the buffer I previously mentioned, but also because the fact that, we're working with economies of scale for our procurement. So we have anywhere from 3 to 4 months of diapers available in our storage at any given time. So that allows us to kind of respond to changing needs. So as we moved from November to December, we were able to hone in a little bit more on what we thought their needs were going to be. So obviously not as much focus on the larger sizes, more of a focus on the smaller sizes compared to the previous months. It still wasn't quite perfect, but it definitely, we're getting better with our data as we go and understanding the needs of this partner, not only from a data perspective, but from continued engagement and understanding, where they're at and where they're trying to go. We're also looking at kind of overall percentages to see, where is their focus on an average. And so this program is pretty split across the board. I mean, there's a little bit of an uptick when it comes to size 6, but for the most part, they're really kind of evenly split in who they're working with compared to some other programs, which we'll see on the next slide. So before I move on to the next slide, I just wanted to pause and see if there were any questions at this point, um, and just give kind of an opportunity or a space for that. No, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. No one's coming off mute, so I'm taking that as we're good to go at this point. So moving on next to doing this as a whole. So that previous slide that we were just looking at was for one site. So what we're doing is we're actually doing this for all of our partners or programs that receive diapers on a monthly basis. So we aggregate this information to compare it to our inventory to understand what our upcoming need is, and then when we need to reorder diapers based on specific sizes. So what you can see on this slide is actually that aggregation and comparison. So you can see, for the 4 different partner examples we have, they have very different programmatic sizes in terms of how many diapers they're distributing. So our partner 1 and our partner 4 have significantly larger programs. This allocation is their allocation for the entire fiscal year. So this is being updated on a monthly basis as, they kind of draw down that allocation. While partners 2 and 3, smaller programs. Kind of similarly, partners 1, 2, and 2 are really doing kind of what we typically see more often from our programs is that the sizes are more geared towards the larger sizes and less of an emphasis on the smaller sizes. However, partner three is kind of the opposite of that. They're really more focused on the smaller sizes and not so much on the larger sizes. And then partner four is across the board. Are pretty evenly distributed in terms of who they're working with and who they're distributing diapers to. So then what we're doing is we're taking these totals by site to then come up with our needed inventory down here in this bottom section. So with that, you can see our total needed inventory versus our total available inventory. You will see that obviously there's a difference here. So all of these are negatives. This does mean that when, looking at this data, we actually don't have enough inventory on hand to fulfill the entire programmatic need for the entire fiscal year. But that's okay. We're doing that intentionally because we're trying to maximize our storage capacity with having, only 3 to 4 months of diapers on site. So we're trying to, keep our storage costs low while also having resources on hand to provide them to our partners. So then what we kind of see is that the average orders over for the month by size break down into these quantities and actually show us, all right, so we actually have 3 to 4 months worth of inventory for every size on hand. So even though we don't have enough to cover the overall program, we do have enough for the next few months until it is time to, place a new order. So we're going through this process on a monthly basis to kind of see, how our partners are trending when it comes to distribution rates, how they're trending in terms of updating these size projections and what that looks like. And then we're giving our vendor quarterly updates so that way they're best able to understand our upcoming needs. So, with that, I think one thing to just kind of flag and note as you're thinking about your own procurement and potentially working with vendors is lead times. So, lead times is the amount of time from when you place an order to when it'll actually be delivered. And so, depending upon the vendor, some are really quick and, can turn around diapers in 2 to 3 weeks, depending upon where they are in relation to where you are. Others, particularly if we're looking at an international vendor, you could be thinking, 60 to 90 days from when you place an order to when you actually are receiving product. So, if you're in a situation where you might be working with an international manufacturer and importing diapers, and say you're talking about a 90-day lead time, which is 3 months, while you have 3 to 4 months of inventory on hand, you're actually probably at a place where you need to be thinking about your next order because of that timeline. Um, so these are kind of all things to keep in mind as you're working through your month over month projections and keeping, knowing at that point, all right, I've got 4 months of inventory, but it takes 3 months for me to get diapers. So am I at a place where I need to reorder and what does that look like? And so all of these are factors that go into, not only making sure you have enough on hand for your distribution partners, but also where you're going to keep your storage costs low and you're not going to end up in a situation where you have partners that need diapers but aren't actually able to receive them because you kind of are in a lull between shipments. Um, so obviously this is a lot of information. Before we move on, I just want to see if anyone had any questions. I also did want to flag that we're working on some collateral resources in terms of like templates for doing this type of work that we'll be sharing with ACF to also be posted on the website with the trainings. So I don't have a specific timeline for those yet, but that is something that we're working on. So again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute. If you have specific questions that you want to talk about individually as they relate to your organization, feel free to stay back at the end, or you can email Christian to set up a time for us to chat one-on-one. And we could kind of talk through how this might be applied to your individual organization. Oh yeah, Mary, you raised your hand.
Hi, yes, thanks. I thought it was
Yeah,
easier than trying to type it.
definitely.
So for the partners that you have, are they the ones then sending you what they believe they need? And if so the projection numbers, and then if so, how far in advance do you all request those in order to put together kind of your monthly projections?
Yeah, so we used to do it that way, but then found that it was hard for partners to actually to be able to predict what they were going to need more than a month or two in advance because they were taking time to kind of survey their families, put that information together, and then get it back to us. So we kind of switched our approach where instead of asking them to send us that information, we're actually taking the orders that they're providing to us, and using that information to then come up with what their need is across different sizes month over month. So these projections that I'm showing here are an aggregation of each of these partners usages from the last like 6 months. So partner one, the 9% for size 2 and 3, the 10% for size 4, etc., is based off their average orders from the last 6 months, and then we apply that to their overall allocation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And
Yeah.
maybe I know you kind of hinted at it, but if we have no historical data, is it just kind of a guessing game for now? And maybe in a few months we'll have a better idea.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, asking partners, just for a broad sense of who they're trying to focus on, I think gives you kind of a pathway in terms of who they're trying to focus on. So if it's the older kids versus the younger kids, the I would say as well, generally we find most programs are focused more on larger sizes to start. So the percentages for partner one that are shown here, actually the kind of 9, 9, 10, 21, 51, are what we traditionally see from the majority of our partners in terms of size distribution when they start off is the focus on the older kids. So that's generally a guiding like force for us if we're going into it and the partner's like, we have no idea. We're like, okay, that's fine. We'll start you off with a baseline, and kind of iterate as we go. So I think that's definitely something you could you're more than welcome to utilize as well as you're starting to think about this. And then once you have a few months data, can come back to it and say, okay, we're actually looking at, just kidding. Our programs aren't doing anything like what Supply Bank's doing. We're only doing size 3 and 4 for the most part, and like update from there. Um, yeah, and so it seems like NAFIA, from North Carolina is saying projected mostly smaller sizes and finding out we need the bigger sizes most, learning as we go. Definitely. And similar to what you just said, NAFIA, we tend to see the bigger sizes are what is more needed than the smaller sizes. I think, some of that is just the partners you're working with and the families they're focused on, what age their children are. And so they may have some insight there, but there is unfortunately some kind of guessing for the first few months. And that's why you want to be buffering and make sure that, if you're a little off, you still have the inventory available, um, and kind of iterate as you go. Any other questions before we move on? I know, again, this is a lot of like Excel data information. And so if that's not your world, it can be a bit overwhelming. So again, if you have questions that you don't feel comfortable asking here, feel free to reach out to Christian and we can set up an individual time to chat. Thank you, Christian. All right, great. So moving on to our last piece. Vendor communication. So the 3 T's when communicating with vendors. First, be transparent. Be as transparent and consistent with your communication as possible. If you say you're going to provide monthly forecasts, quarterly forecasts, etc., honor that. While it may seem like a small thing, even when items are fluctuating, vendors kind of appreciate being kept in the loop and having regular updates provided. Timely communication. So providing timely communication to your vendors. So if a partner is starting to go through a dramatic increase in volume, or if you're seeing a large fluctuation in size, communicating that to your vendor and letting them know as soon as possible, so that not only you all are planning, but they can also start to plan in terms of how does that affect their overall production and affect the way they serve your business. And finally, this is one that I personally find really important, remembering that, communication with vendors is a true two-way street. Remember that your vendors really at the end of the day are your partners. I think a lot of the times our relationship with vendors can kind of be seen as a one-way street or, you're here to serve us. I've really found that, treating them as partners, having open communication going both ways really does foster a healthy and productive relationship. And kind of the old adage, you catch more flies with honey. Building those strong relationships definitely goes a long way. And also sharing your successes with vendors in terms of the value of the relationship and allowing them to see how their products are making a difference in the communities that you serve can definitely kind of help support and grow your relationship as are starting to work together and hopefully working together over a longer period of time. And one last thing before we open it up to other questions. Similar to diapers, so projections for wipes, tote bags, rash cream, anything else that you might be distributing should be reviewed and handled on a monthly basis. Obviously, for these items, you're not going to be worrying about sizes, you're just going to be worrying about quantity. So, depending upon how often and how many of these items you're distributing, it might make sense to just do one round of procurement and store the items for multiple years. However, if you take this approach, do keep in mind that things like wipes and rash creams have expiration dates that need to be tracked and managed. So if you're communicating with a vendor and flag for them that you're going to be storing this for 2 years, they might have recommendations around maybe don't do that because our products tend to expire in a year, or oh that should be fine, not an issue. So just another kind of added layer to keep in mind that you don't see with diapers. So again, if anyone on this call was looking for specific advice or insight around projecting needs for items besides diapers, happy to set up time outside of this training to discuss that further. It's a bit simpler than diapers just because you're not.
Yes, Mary, I think Jessica did freeze. I have messaged her. Hopefully she can rejoin shortly. Just give her a minute. I was also wondering, is it my internet? You just never know these days. So it does look like she's aware of the problem and left, and hopefully will rejoin us shortly. So while we wait, does anybody want to share the most exciting thing that they've learned so far? I'd love to hear from people who are just getting started that have maybe learned something that's going to be helpful in upcoming weeks or months. Feel free to just come off chat or mute or drop it in the chat.
Hi, everyone. I am so sorry. I'm not sure if Christian updated. I did text you. My power briefly went out. So I am back. We had a power surge. Let me reshare my screen and we'll kick it off from where we were at. All right. So luckily we were right at the end. Again, I really apologize about that. We don't even have weather today. I don't know how that happened. So as I was just saying, there are other items beyond diapers that you may be looking at to provide to your families. And so if anyone needs help with, doing projections for wipes, tote bags, rash creams, etc., feel free to reach out to Christian and we can set up a time to meet and discuss. So with that, we actually are at the end of this presentation. So if anyone has specific questions, feel free to come off mute or drop them in the chat. Christian and I will both be around for, we were booked till 10 or 10 here in California. So we have about another 25 minutes if there's anything else that anyone would like to discuss. No? All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Again, feel free to reach out. Great. Thanks, Mary. So yeah, if you have anything else that you'd like to chat about, feel free to email Christian and we can set up a time to meet one-on-one. But if not, enjoy your Fridays, and have a great weekend.